What's up, tribe? Let's delve into the world of E.D.C. Now, if you don't know, there's Gunfighter Life and Alpha Male Podcast. Many people probably listen to both. Some may listen to one or the other. This is one of those that cross-pollinates, and I'm not going to apologize for that. As such, I'm going to put this out on both. However, I'm going to do a little addendum and talk a little bit more about the gun side of things in the Gunfighter Life episode, but the bulk of it will be the same if you don't want to listen to it twice, just so you know. E.D.C. That's the cross-pollination. Everyday carry. It's for the tactical man. It's for the practical man. It's for every man. Everyday carry. I've done other episodes on everyday carry. This is going to be my everyday carry in 2024. In the beginning of 2024, I'm kind of doing more so on Gunfighter Life. Top this or top that for 2024. Well, E.D.C. should develop over time. Always be trying to improve as a man in many different ways, and E.D.C. is a very tiny fraction of that. Mostly growing in relationship with God and understanding God, loving God, falling in love with God, and being loved by God. That's the first commandment, the greatest of all the commandments, which is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. This is the first commandment, and the second like it is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. And that's a pretty good intro into welcome to the podcast. Whether Alpha Male or Gunfighter Life, where we talk about the prime directive to make godly men strong and strong men godly. With that, a brief bio. First and foremost, a Christian, U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran. Where was I? My Rhodesian Ridgeback, Alexander Hamilton, is a little restless. Hunting season is, my hunting license expired on the 31st, and I haven't renewed it yet. And I think he's a little restless. He likes the mental stimulation. I just took him on a run, but he likes the mental stimulation of hunting. Anyway, where was I? U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran. Did a couple of combat tours after that. Urban warfare instructor. Also served in another branch of the armed forces. Private contractor for the federal government. Commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters. Professional big game hunter and guide. Hunted all over this beautiful country. State rifle and pistol champion a few times over. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. Psalm 144. That's probably enough. Let's get into E.D.C. in 2023. So, start with what's important, the Word. Now, I'm a big fan of having a Bible, having an E.D.C. Bible. I have an E.D.C. Bible, what I call my E.D.C. Bible, but I don't generally walk around with it in my hands. But what I do have, which I'll get to when I get to the knife, is a very small, compact. It says Bible on it, but it was basically, I believe, a pilot's emergency Bible, so that they can have some verses on them in an emergency survival scenario. And it's got some good key verses in it. It's very small and compact, and it's part of my E.D.C. now. In addition to that, I also have, let's move to the cell phone, have the Bible app on my phone with a couple of versions translated. Not affiliated with Bible app, but I've been using them for years and years. Bible app is super cool, super important. Have a full Bible. Could something happen to your phone? Yeah, that's why I like a few verses backed up, and even more important, to have some verses memorized. But
Exodus 30. Make an altar of acacia wood for burning incense.
Anyway, that's Bible app on the phone. There are many different translations. Some you can have play like an audiobook. Some are not available like that, and you're just going to read it. But either way, there's a bunch of different translations from King James, NIV. That is one of your most important E.D.C. items there. As far as the phone goes, make sure you got the compass somewhere handy on your phone. As far as additional survival-related item stuff, I have the Garmin app, because I have the Garmin InReach, which is not always part of my EDC, usually only when I go outside, but it's a good navigation app. Have the SAS Survival Guide on there. And obviously, the Apple Podcast and Spotify apps on there so you can listen to Alpha Male Podcast and Gunfighter Life. But on the phone, I don't care if you have a smartphone or a flip phone or whatever, but some way to communicate, assuming that that kind of stuff is still viable in whatever scenario you're in, is super handy. Not to mention there's a pretty powerful battery in that phone. If the phone isn't working and you need a battery for something to start a fire or whatever, if you have to, it'll work for that as well. Also, in the back of my phone, I keep a little bit of cordage, a little bit of blue thread, numbers 15, and I keep a razor blade, not like a utility razor blade, but like a scalpel cutting razor blade back there in case something happens and all I have is my phone. I have a really sharp cutting tool. It's sterile because it's sealed up in like the surgical packing, which is really thin. And if I need to cut something out of myself and I want a sterile blade, I may not want to use my E.D.C knife, right? That I've been using to open stuff and cut stuff and, gut deer and skin deer. That's probably not the knife I want to dig something out of my flesh with. So having a nice sterile sharp blade and some redundancy, even if I lose my knife or whatever, I still have a blade, a really sharp surgical blade. Alright, just going around here, let's do counterclockwise just because. Recently switched my E.D.C flashlight. Why? Because I lost my other one on a hunt, and I forget which hunt I was doing. Oh, I was trying to track down a mountain lion in the snow, and I don't know how many miles covered, I don't know how much elevation. I thought I would catch up to that mountain lion, but he out-cardioed me that day. I did not realize that male mountain lions, when I looked it up, have a 100-mile range, 100 square mile range. That's impressive. So he won that time. Anyway, I went from a smaller Streamlight micro stream to the larger one. Actually, when I ordered it, I thought it was the same size as my old one. My old one was a little bit smaller and thinner. It was a good E.D.C light. This one was twice as bright, and I thought, oh, the technology has improved. I'm going to get the brighter one. Well, the technology may have improved, but it's a bigger light. It's a little bigger than I like, to be honest. I kind of like my older one. This one hasn't really gotten in the way so far. It's much more powerful. I think it's almost twice as bright, but it's the USB micro stream. They make the different sizes, so go with the smaller one if you want uber small, and it's still bright enough for most situations. I did run into a couple of situations with my old light where I wanted something a little bit brighter, where I was like out in the woods at night. But for most things, a smaller one is fine. Alright, going into that front left pocket, which is where that... Oh, backing up on the light, I keep a blue rubber band. Couple of reasons. Blue tends to stand out if you drop it in the woods. Also, a really cool tactical tip. You can run it around the back of the clip, and you can run it around the front of the flashlight around the back of your hand, if that makes sense audibly. So that flashlight is stuck in your hand. So if you're doing a tactical reload, or you're changing a tire, or trying to do something with both hands, you don't have to hold on to the flashlight. The flashlight will stay there. And that's really handy. And it takes up almost no extra weight. Also on the front, just because it fits, I keep my wedding band. It's one of those rubber... just wedding bands. I shouldn't say can't stand. I really don't prefer to wear a wedding ring. If I am going to be faithful to my wife, by God's grace, hopefully always, it will be because of morals, not because I have a band on my finger. And I just don't like stuff on my fingers, on my hands, on my wrists. I don't wear a watch. I don't like that stuff on my hands. But if my wife and I are going out or something that makes her happy, I'll take it off the flashlight and put it on my finger. Also, if I wear it on my finger, I've noticed that I lose them so fast. I'll buy like the bulk pack of the cheap rubber rings. Even at that, if I wear them all the time, I lose them all the time. Putting on gloves, taking off gloves, they fly out. Be doing an exercise at the gym, it'll be bugging me. I'll take it off and set it down. So anyway, that's maybe something you may or may not want to do, but the rubber band is really handy and super cheap and a very practical modification to your flashlight. Also in that pocket, I carry a Victorinox Classic, and if you don't know the Victorinox Classic, it's super tiny. It's like a keychain knife, you might want to call it. It's very small. It's about the size of your pinky, maybe smaller than your pinky. It's got a very small blade, which I call like my sacrificial blade. I'll use it for like sacrificing if I'm going to do some nasty work with it, like cutting a gummy nasty tape or something that's going to dull the knife. I don't really care. It's easy to sharpen. but it's a good, basic, easy to sharpen, very small knife. Not for any kind of serious task, but for a sacrificial blade. It's a good knife for that. Also has a screwdriver, which I use quite a bit. It's like a flathead Phillips head combination. And I use that all the time for gun stuff, especially like tightening a holster or screws coming loose or sighting in a rifle. Comes in super handy. It's also got a nail file on there, and on the other side it has a pair of scissors. It also has the toothpick and the tweezers. Now, tweezers come in really handy, some places more than others, but when I lived in the Southwest, like pulling cactus spurs out of my dog or myself, fall into some cactus, it's a lot easier to get out sometimes with tweezers, especially those small little insidious like hair-like cactus things. Those are miserable. Anyway, it's super small. All those tools, it may sound like a lot, but it's a very, very tiny thing. I doubt you'd even notice it in your pocket. And attached to it, I mentioned it's meant for like a keychain. I don't keep it on a keychain. I keep it attached to a mini Sharpie. I use mini Sharpie all the time for marking on myself, for marking different things, for writing down notes. A mini Sharpie in the pocket. It's very small and lightweight also. In fact, it's starting to run out. Probably time to replace it. Also in that front pocket, the cordage may change, but I have some really small, like 100-pound test cordage, smaller than 550 cord, and I have a little bit bigger cordage, but still smaller than 550 cord. I'm not exactly sure how much. Both are rolled up in little hanks about the size of my palm, because I basically just wrap it around my palm and then tie it off or put a piece of tape around it. I've used that I don't know how many times recently for just random stuff. I'm going to spray paint something, camouflage it, the last thing I can think of, and I tie it up with a piece of string in my pocket so I can hold it and spray paint it and not get paint on my hands, and then let it dry by hanging it, and then I roll it and put it back in my pocket. Just, they get used quite a bit, and having that little piece of string in your pocket is pretty handy. And it's not crazy expensive string or anything. If I use it and it gets messed up, I just throw it away, and when I get home I roll up a new piece. That entire spool of that, like 100-pound nylon, I think nylon or polyester rope was very affordable for I don't know how many feet. Also in that pocket there is one earplug. There should be two. I'm just being real with you guys. I've been shooting quite a bit recently. And then moving directly back from that, on my belt, and I should say the belt and the number one that I recommend and have for years for an E.D.C belt is the 511 TDU belt. Tango Delta Uniform belt. It's a great belt. It's a good, sturdy, beefy belt that doesn't scream tactical. There's a couple of different colors, I think, and different sizes. But they'll come in generally two colors. The front will be like a Cody brown or a khaki color, and the back will be black or green and black. So whether I'm wearing black pants, which I almost never do, or I'm wearing tan pants, which I usually prefer, I'll wear the tan side out. It doesn't scream tactical belt, but it's a really good, sturdy belt. It's a good balance. And it's beefy enough to carry a full-size fighting handgun, which we'll get to. Anyway, moving back just behind that pocket, IDPA style, I rock a spare magazine pouch. I couldn't tell you what kind this is. Bought it at a gun show. But any good, decent magazine pouch that carries that magazine, if that's how you want to carry it. I've got a spare magazine for, it's a spare 17 round, it's a spare 15 round magazine. It may be 17, it says 20, but I replaced the base plate. I didn't like the big fat extended base plate on my spare mag for this gun, so I changed it to a rubber bumpered one. But it's a spare full-size magazine for my full-size fighting handgun. I'll get into more of the gun nerdy stuff and add that into the Gunfighter Life episode. But a decent magazine pouch. Probably talk more about different magazine pouches for the Gunfighter Life edition. Alright, going back into the wallet. Got a wallet. I got a couple of different ways to pay. I should have some cash in there. I don't. I'm just being real with you guys. But a little bit of cash in there is a good idea. I do generally keep some spare cash in the vehicle. But a wallet with some basic stuff, ID, couple of different ways to pay, different banks, just in case something's happening. Probably in modern times, if you travel at all, you've probably had your card shut down because they say it's suspicious activity, which can, at the minor inconvenience if you have more than one way to pay. But if you're stuck somewhere trying to get gas, and again, you don't have cash, and your bank, you can't get a hold of them to get your card turned back on, and you need gas, like, have two different ways from two different banks. A little bit of redundancy there. Also, on my wallet, I have my phone number written on my wallet. So if somebody honest finds my wallet, they can return it to me. Also, it's in like a wax canvas wallet as well. I would recommend the wallet because it's a good one, but I don't think they make it anymore. And on there I wrote God provides, because he certainly does. And then let's go around to the other pocket. The other pocket, I carry a tourniquet. I carry a SWAT T. And part of the update for 2024, for a long time I carried a rat tourniquet. Now, I know that a cat tourniquet is the best tourniquet for a tourniquet. I understand that. However, I don't, unless I'm in like battle dress uniform, I don't carry a cat tourniquet as E.D.C. I'd rather have maybe a less awesome tourniquet, but that's still a really good tourniquet that I will carry all the time. For years, I carried 2 spare magazine pouches on my support side. Behind my go-to actual reload, I would carry a rat tourniquet. I switched to the SWAT T for a couple of reasons. One, I just wanted to try it, to be honest. 2, it's a lot more multifunctional. Meaning, if you know what you're doing, you can use it as a bandage, you can make a slingshot out of it. You could use it to bind stuff together. You could strip it into smaller pieces and use it to make shelter. You could do all kinds of stuff with it. It's basically like a big, giant exercise band. So it's more multifunctional. I could use it as another bandage. I could use it as a pressure dressing with the right other materials if I needed to. So it's more multifunctional. And then also, it's about the size of a lot of the old school wallets, so it fits in my other back pocket. It fits in a pocket. If I'm downgrading my E.D.C. and I just want to throw some stuff in my pockets, a pocket gun, a pocket reload, that can go in my pocket, and I don't have to wear a bunch of stuff on my belt if I'm not wearing an overshirt. So that moving to the SWAT T, it's not as intuitive to use. I would say it's probably less intuitive to use than a cat, certainly, and even than a rat tourniquet. So it has some advantages. It's good for animals. It's good for very small children and things like that. So it has advantages and disadvantages. I'm not saying it's a better tourniquet than a cat tourniquet, but I'm saying I will carry it on me. And for months and months, for a long time now, it's been in my pocket. All right, so let's get to what many people will be their favorite, the knife, because this has changed. Now I mentioned a couple of other small blades. This is has been since Alaska, go-to E.D.C. knife. Not that it's always this, but it's been mostly this for a while. And this is a Tops Tracker number 3. You may have heard me talk about the Tops Tracker. It's a very unconventional knife. When I got my first one, I thought, it's kind of crazy looking. I'm going to get it. Maybe it's a gimmick. I started carrying it for not bushcrafty type stuff, but I carried it as a small fixed blade for tactical stuff when I was the commander of a tactical team. That one was a little bit small for wilderness type work. When I was living in Alaska, my Tops Tracker, which I tried the year previous, was a little bit big. Just the original one. That's like a halfway between a short sword and a knife. It's a beefy beast. The Tracker number 3 is a really good balance. It's good enough for a really good usable field fixed blade knife. It's big, it's beefy. It's got a good handle. It's got a full grip. It's got finger grooves, which are not my favorite, but they're not crazy finger grooves. I can live with them. But the Tops Tracker number 3, for me, currently, is a good size. It's a very good size fixed blade knife that I can E.D.C. every day. So I carry a full-size fighting handgun on the other side. It's about the same as far as being able to conceal, and I usually just throw on an overshirt, or in the wintertime, like a puffy vest, because it's winter in northern Idaho, so nobody bats an eye at a puffy vest, or a flannel shirt. Or even in summertime, just like a loose-fitting button-up shirt that you throw over. Even when I lived in Arizona, nobody turns an eye to that. Especially if you know about living in the desert, you usually want like a loose-fitting, light-colored long-sleeve shirt. And so, anyway, it's a Tops Tracker number 3. It's a very unconventional design. If you're not familiar, it's got like the front half of the knife looks like a conventional drop-point blade knife. And then you get like a cutaway version in the middle, which gives you like a really good cutting notch, kind of like a gut hook, but not really. I'm not actually a big fan of gut hooks, but I'm a big fan of this for doing some different work on different materials. You basically get like 2 or 3 different knife profiles in one, and the back of it has a saw, and it's not just like one of those gimmicky saws. Like, it's actually a decent saw. It's not as good as a purpose-built saw, but it works as a saw. It also works really well for notching stuff. If you need to cut a notch into something, a piece of wood, for whatever you're doing, building something, it works really good for notching. It wouldn't be great to like try and cut down a tree with it, but it would be good for notching wood. This one, I think, I don't know if they all do, but it comes with my Micarta handle. I cut some extra grooves in there with a file just to make it even more grippy. More tactile, that's probably a better word, right? More tactile. A little tip on the back of it, I made a small lanyard with some cord so you can wrap your pinky in the back of it and you can choke back on the knife. Sometimes you want to choke up on a knife if you want more control. If I'm hacking with this thing like a machete, it's pretty big when you do this for that reason. It's not as good as a purpose-built machete, but it's a lot better than most knives because it's got that weight forward balance and it really can chop. Anyway, if you've got that lanyard on the back, you can choke back on it and put the end of the handle right near the end of your hand, and it makes it like a much longer knife. And with that small lanyard, you don't have to worry about it flying out of your hand. I forget where I picked that up, but it's a great tip. Now, there's a lot going on in the sheath here. Something I kind of like to do with my E.D.C knives. This is just a good place for the other smaller E.D.C stuff that I carry. Anyway, the knife comes in a good Kydex sheath, and it comes for scout carry with 2 clips on it. Now, I've tried scout carry. It works if you're just carrying like a knife and going long distances, and you're not carrying a pack. Now, it kind of stinks if you're carrying a pack because I like my pack to ride there in the small of my back, and it rides on top of the knife, which is not great for me. Your mileage may vary on that. Also, if you're getting in and out of a car, scout carry kind of sucks for me because it, again, rubs right where that small of my back is. So I struggled with that for a while, but what I did was I just kept both clips on, but I clip it on the top clip and orient it instead of horizontal scout carry, which is like, if you don't know, horizontally across the small of your back. I carry the one clip and it goes vertical right behind my spare magazine pouch. If I want to, I can still just, it literally just rotates, and I can rotate it into scout carry if I want. But I usually carry it vertically on my opposite side, and that actually kind of works out nicely because it balances out the weight of the full-size fighting handgun that I carry. So it actually, I think, kind of feels better when I have that full spare magazine and this decent-sized knife because it kind of evens out the weight distribution on the E.D.C. Anyway, it's a good sheath as it comes. I made that minor modification to carry it vertically. And like I said, a lot going on in the sheath. On that bottom clip that I said it has 2 clips, that's where I keep that little small Bible that I started with. That little small E.D.C Bible with some key verses in it. That Bible stays in there. Where to go after that? Between the 2 clips, I have wrapped a decent-sized piece of fire cord. Fire cord is 550 cord that has fire starting material inside of it. I shouldn't have to explain why that's important. I also have a decent-sized length of micro cord. I like micro cord for a lot of things better than 550 cord. There's a decent amount of that in there. Several feet of it. And then wrapped around, sticking on the cordage train, I have Spectra. Spectra, kind of the big brand name in that is Spider Wire. I don't remember if this is Spider Wire or some other like Bass Pro Shop knockoff, XL or something. But it's Spectra is touted as being much lighter and stronger than steel. And it's much stronger and more abrasive resistance than regular monofilament fishing line. I have several feet of that. You can use it for all kinds of stuff if you need a really thin, really strong cordage. And on that I have attached a fish hook. A pretty small fish hook that clips into the back of the sheath so it doesn't poke anybody. Now I could use that as a fish hook. I could file the barb down and use it as a needle. I could stitch myself up if I had to. But it's a good multifunctional thing. You can make fish hooks, but it's so much easier just to have a fish hook. And they weigh so little, a small fish hook. You can catch a big fish on a small hook. It weighs almost nothing, both the Spectra and the fish hook. Why not have it on there? Anyway, wrapped around that to keep a bunch of this stuff in place is 2 Ranger bands, a large and a small. And they're basically like a big beefy rubber band. Mostly they're on there for fire stuff, especially in wet, nasty conditions like you might often find yourself in trying to start a fire. I also made a band of like elastic that's pretty fat that goes around there to hold stuff in place. On the fire, I keep a decent sized ferrocerium rod. It's tucked up on that knife sheath. Doesn't really take up anything as far as form factor goes, but it's a decent sized ferrocerium rod. Moving from fire to water, I keep a very small titanium pill container, weighs very little, and in that fits at least 10, maybe more, water purification tablets. And this is something I use quite a bit. I often will just go out. I'm like, I'm in the North Idaho Panhandle. There's wilderness everywhere, and I love being in it. Sometimes I'll just go out in the wilderness. If I have my E.D.C, I'm good. And if I need fresh water, I've got the water purification tablets. It's often not easy or convenient to boil water. It takes a lot of time and energy to boil water. Water purification tablets, especially if you're on the move, is really handy to have, and they weigh so little. And these little waterproof titanium containers are so light and handy. Anyway, it's got at least 10 water purification tablets in there. I use it quite a bit, trying to remember to refill it out of a bigger container. But I found it's a really good system. Even if I have that stuff in my pack, if my pack's not there or I lose my pack, it's good for redundancy. Fire, water, navigation. I have a small button compass. Now keep in mind there's a lot of metal on this, including the knife. So if I want to use it as a compass, I need to take it off. Most of that stuff is just attached with a piece of cordage that I have a knot tied in. I can just untie it and take individual items off as I see fit. Not super high tech, but super effective. Anyway, I got that small button compass. Also, for navigation, if I get lost, I have a whistle. It's a Tops whistle. They come with a lot of Tops knives, and they're flat, so it fits fairly flat along the sheath, and it has a very, very distinct sound. Not like most other whistles. They're not like you're whistling like... but sounds kind of like a train whistle. So very distinct there. Is there anything else on here? Also on here, I have a much smaller blade, because the Tops Tracker number 3 is a decent beefy sized blade. If I want a small but still stiff blade, because sometimes it's easier to do work with a very small blade, I have a Doug Ritter, and it's super, super tiny. It's like maybe an inch blade. It's very small, very lightweight, but still very stiff. I think it might have been designed for like a really small keychain or neck knife, but it fits flat on there, doesn't really take up any extra space, and weighs very little. And this whole setup doesn't weigh a whole lot. Anyway, that's just the E.D.C kind of knife setup that I have. Let me clip that back on. And then let's get to what you guys may have been waiting for. The E.D.C gun. The E.D.C gun is a Sig Sauer P226 single action only Legion in 357 Sig originally, but I had it rechambered for 9mm. Just got a screaming deal on it. I wanted it at 9mm. It came in 357 Sig. Not that I don't like 357 Sig, I do, and I have hunted with it in 357 Sig successfully. But for most things and for E.D.C, it's generally rolling around in 9mm, so don't want to misrepresent there, like I'm usually rocking it in 357 Sig. I'm usually rocking it in 9mm. I did some custom work on the gun, on the grips. The trigger is stock and fantastic. It's got a Barstow precision barrel, again rechambered in 9mm. It's crazy accurate, crazy reliable. It's a phenomenal gun. It's got the standard flush fit magazine. I'll get into more detail on the gun in the Gunfighter to Life episode. Rocking that, and I think a Blade Tech holster. Got a tech lock, it clips on, it's really good. Works nicely with the belt. I can take it on and off without taking my belt on and off, which is really nice. Loaded with good defensive ammunition. Alright. Moving down, I don't want this to be overstated. Base layer, especially in the wintertime. It's winter now, and I'm in northern Idaho. And again, sometimes we'll just walk out in the wilderness. I usually grab a jacket or something, but a good base layer. I'm wearing a good 100% merino wool base layer. That's important. Maybe more important than all this other stuff in certain conditions. Also, I'm wearing 2 pair of socks, really tight dress socks, and big, heavy, thick alpaca wool socks. Especially since there's snow on the ground in a lot of places here. Those big, thick alpaca wool socks, I got into those when I was professionally guiding. They're really warm and really nice, and they'll work even when they're wet. But they will rub a little bit if I'm rucking or hiking or doing active stuff, so I like the thin pair of dress socks. That's kind of an old grunt infantry trick there. I want to do that if you're into rucking or want to get into rucking, keep that in mind. And this is really, really important. Think about your shoes, and you may have a lifestyle drastically different than mine. I've worked corporate management. I've had to wear 3-piece suits. you know, the fancy vest and the fancy tie and the fancy shoes. Even there, you can get shoes that appear as good fancy dress shoes, but are made by, let's say, Skechers, that you could run in. You could run for miles and miles in. Now, you can run in dress shoes. I've certainly done it. When I was a boot in LAPD, they made the boots wear dress shoes, which is not very practical, but it's kind of one of those hazing things. You can certainly run in dress shoes, even the crappy Bates hard leather dress shoes. It's not pleasant. They make dress shoes that are a lot more comfortable to run in. So you might want to consider that. Anyway, for my E.D.C shoes, I got turned on to these. Really well-made leather shoes. These are the African Ranger boots. I think Tom Green or Tim Green. Apparently made for South African Rangers. I heard about these. I got a pair because I needed my other pair, which I'll usually wear like trail runners, as a good go-to E.D.C shoe, which are fantastic, but not in the winter in northern Idaho. I needed something a little bit more waterproof, a little bit more, again, kind of like the belt. They're really, really good boots. I mean, made for African Rangers. They probably last a lifetime if you get them resoled, because the soles are going to come off and break and wear through. But if you get them resoled and you take care of the leather, probably last you a lifetime, or at least a lot of years. And you treat them right, they'll be waterproof. And they don't scream like tactical. They're not like a tactical boot, right? They're not like... They don't scream like tactical operator boot. Pull your pants down over them, they kind of just look like a decent leather shoe. But they're in fact like a over-the-ankle boot. And they're really, really nice. They're not as light or as comfortable as trail runners, but they are really good for... Like, if this is what I had... in a really bad situation, I'd be like, okay. Are they great to run in? Not great. Are they great to ruck in? They're not as good as trail runners, I'll be honest, but probably better in the snow, or better in sand, or better with cactus. So in a broad category, I guess what I'm saying is don't overlook the footwear. In order for your hands to do anything, any kind of fighting, any kind of work, your feet have to get you there, right? Unless you get attacked in your bed. Don't overlook your cardio, your fitness, and your shoes. Super important, and I think often overlooked in E.D.C discussions. They'll jump straight to the tactical stuff, and they won't even mention the footwear. So, footwear is super important. Obviously, physical fitness is important, but I don't know if that's part of E.D.C. But yeah, carry your physical fitness with you, and decent practical footwear. I do carry behind the driver's seat a really tall pair of rubber boots, and my trail runners, so I can grab them if I need to change out my footwear, and if I'm somewhere far away from home with the truck, then they'll be there. That's kind of going outside the E.D.C. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this E.D.C development for 2024 edition. Not saying you have to do what I do or carry what I carry or do things the way that I do things, but hopefully maybe one or more of those things on there have inspired you. Alright, gunfighters, as stated, let's get into the tactical stuff. I mentioned the knife. The Tops Tracker 3 is a big, beefy knife. Is it the most tactical of knives? No. If you're in an urban environment, you may want like a decent Tonto blade, or you may want a more special purpose fighting knife. Especially if you are not carrying a handgun. It's a good all-around knife, and the Tops Tracker number 3 is a wicked blade. It's a beefy blade. As stated previously in other episodes, I like to carry it on my support side, on the side that I'm not carrying my full-size fighting handgun. There are several scenarios where you might want a weapon on both sides. If somebody has you pinned down with your gun pinned to the ground and you can't grab it, or that arm is broken, or somebody's got that arm pinned behind your back, you're shot in that arm, right? There are many situations where you might want a good option on both sides. I would encourage you, if you carry a gun, to carry your whatever your go-to, you may carry more than one blade, your go-to fighting blade, if it's a backup, should be on your support side. That's my opinion. You can do what you want. That's also a reason I like a fixed blade, so I can get it in a hurry. Especially with one hand. You may or may not have the ability or time to deploy said weapon, if it's a fixed blade. Anyway, you know my thoughts on that. If you're going to carry a knife and it's a backup defensive tool, make sure it can be used as such. My spare magazine, and I guess this is a good time to get into ammo. This is obviously a backup magazine for the gun that I'm carrying. And for years, my go-to has been Winchester Ranger T. It's a phenomenal load. If you want a good resource to figure out good loads, you might check out you may want to check out some resources as to how different loads perform, because they're not all created equal. Don't go bargain basement on your carry ammunition. And also, there is several reasons I'm for carrying a full-size fighting handgun, many of which are that hollow points are velocity based, and a lot of R&D goes into good defensive loads in duty size handguns, combat handguns, whatever you want to call it. And those same loads that perform very well out of a Glock 17 or a SIG 226 may or may not expand at all out of a Glock 43, because you're dealing with much smaller, a much shorter barrel, lower velocities. I'm not saying they won't. I'm saying it's a lot more likely they're going to perform well out of a full-size handgun. So even though it's the same caliber, 9mm and 9mm, don't think that your Glock 43 is the equivalent of a Glock 17 for a lot of reasons, and that's just one of them. Anyway, a good... You know I'm big on this. A good defensive handgun ammo that shoots point of aim, point of impact, and is reliable when fired out of your gun by you, not somebody else said. So, there's that on the ammo. Some good ones. I like Spear. I tend to prefer 147s in my 9mm. I also settled on that years ago when all kinds of different ammo was easy to obtain. If I could go back and I knew the future back then, I might have settled on 115s because they're the most common, even though I prefer the ballistics of a 147 better. But you do you, 115s, 124s, 147s. I like the 147s. In the 9mm, I tend to prefer the recoil, that gentle roll, rather than a snap. I also tend to prefer the way they perform ballistically. And I like the profile of the bullets, which tend to be more of a truncated cone design. But you do you on the defensive load. Some good ones I would say you might want to start looking at. And again, you need to do your own testing. Don't just load up because I mentioned one of these loads. That's not how this works. But I mentioned the Winchester Ranger Ts. They make different gram weights. The Spear Gold Dot is kind of the standard. If you just want me to mention a standard, the Spear Gold Dots in any grain weight generally do pretty well out of the right gun. And the Federal HSTs are not bad, depending on the load. Especially, I think, work well in 40 cals and 45s, and they do okay in the 9s. So those are some places you might want to look. Now, I mentioned, this is my carry, so let me unload here before I start. Let me talk about the gun I'm carrying today when I consider it my best carry gun. It is a Sig Sauer P220 Legion, single action only. Meaning it's not double single. Like if the hammer's down and you pull a trigger, nothing's going to happen. You carry it cocked and locked, hammer back, safety on. I have it set up for a true co-witness with a Trijicon RMR, and the Trijicon RMR that doesn't take batteries. It works off radiation and ambient light, daytime, nighttime, no batteries to change, no electronics, rock solid. I was doing wind sprints one time with this gun, and it fell out so hard on rocks that I dented the barrel and did not break the optic. And it landed, I believe, on the optic. So, Trijicon RMR, I had it cut out and direct mounted with two big beefy screws, not any adapter plates. I did some custom work on the grips. I did not do any custom work to the trigger because it is great the way that it is. Also, it's a carry gun. I don't want it too light as far as the trigger goes. And I mention co-witness iron sights. Now, I don't always carry this gun. My other one that I will often carry is the M17. And I wasn't real big on that gun when I first got it, but I really fell in love with it the more I used it and carried it and shot it. For a polymer striker-fired gun, it carries and shoots quite well. And it's lighter than this gun, even though this one's an aluminum frame or aluminium, depending on what country you're in. It's heavier than the M17. And I have that M17 and this one because they're very similar in the way that they carry and shoot and the way that I carry them. Be nice they took the same mags. They don't. That M17 set up very similarly with the Trijicon RMR. Now that one has an adapter plate, but it is true co-witness. Ever since I've mounted it, I've had no issues with the adapter plate or anything. One thing on, if you're mounting an optic, make sure that you actually use a torque wrench and actually use Loctite. That's too crucial a thing to just slap on there and finger tighten and be like, it's probably good, and not put Loctite on it. Put Loctite on it, make sure you clean your threads from all lubricant and stuff like that. For obvious reasons, if you're putting Loctite on it and there's old lube on there, it may or may not work. So That's really crucial if you're going to run an optic. And I would be more inclined in 2024 to go with a budget gun with a really good optic if you're going to run an optic than a really good gun with a budget optic, because handguns have been pretty standard and not a lot has changed as far as form and function in a while. Optics are growing leaps and bounds. Budget optics can be dubious. So again, take that advice for what it's worth. The M17 I have also a setup with the Trijicon RMR. Same, it's a different model because it's a different color. And I prefer the green triangle in the tritium fiber optic. Again, no batteries. And it's a green triangle. So I have a very precise aiming point. I can hit the headshot out at 50 yards. And also it's a big green triangle, and I can just use the entire triangle like I would use a front sight. And again, I do like the co-witness. So if something were to happen with the optic, I can still use the irons. And I can use those irons to guide myself to the dot if I need to. Generally, regular shooting I don't need to, but if I'm, let's say, shooting urban prone, one-handed on the ground, something I don't practice all the time, it's nice to be able to guide with that front sight so I can pick up the dot. This one is a Blade Tech holster. My other one is I think it's Black Scorpion, and I actually like the Black Scorpion better than the Blade Tech, even though I think it was cheaper. It's just, it's lighter, it's handier, it does all the things the Blade Tech does, but it's sleeker and smaller, and it's got good retention. Anyway, it's Black Scorpion. I think I got it on Amazon, and that's for the M17, but very similar setups. You know that sometimes if I'm just carrying like a pair of shorts, taking the dog out or something, I will often just carry my 357 Magnum. That really hasn't changed. I also know that my wife and I's small semi-autos got stolen, so I haven't replaced those yet. For my uber small, uber lightweight, like very minimalistic carry, I have that Benchmade bailout, which weighs very little, and I have the Scandium Smith & Wesson 360 PD, which is like 11 point something ounces. Super small, super lightweight for E.D.C. Anyway, for those of you guys on Gunfighter Life listening that are more attuned to the tactical stuff, I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's probably where I'll plug in the more tactical stuff for Gunfighter Life. Seems like I gave you quite a bit of tactical tips of the day today. So probably going to forego that because there was a bunch in the episode itself. But I'll pull out that little E.D.C Bible that I keep on my E.D.C knife and read you a verse from it. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. That's from Psalm 119. Why not read another one? Every word of God is pure. He is a shield unto them that put their trust in him. Remember, whatever you have for E.D.C or don't have, whatever you have, you wouldn't have anything without God. Remember what's really important, men. Thanks, and have a blessed day.